Chapter 1. The Forerunner Saga. Long before human memory began, before language, agriculture, or even the earliest sparks of culture took shape on Earth, the galaxy was tended by a species whose influence would echo across 100,000 years. These were the Forerunners, ancient custodians who believed they alone were chosen to uphold a creed called the Mantle of Responsibility. The mantle was both burden and purpose. It demanded stewardship of all living things. It required that the most advanced civilization preserve life rather than dominate it. Forerunners interpreted this doctrine as a duty to guide, guard, and if necessary, sacrifice to maintain stability across thousands of worlds. Towers of impossible height pierced alien skies. Machines the size of continents drifted through the void, performing tasks set ages earlier. They built star roads that allowed their vessels to travel between systems quicker than light. Their achievements were so vast and intricate that later species, stumbling upon their ruins, could hardly imagine hands had ever shaped them. Yet even the Forerunners lived in the shadow of an older legacy. Before them existed the Precursors, beings of unimaginable sophistication who had not only shaped the galaxy, but seeded life itself across countless worlds. Humans, Forerunners, and other species all trace their origins to these mysterious architects. The Precursors, according to fragmented accounts, were compassionate and strange, existing beyond the boundaries of time in ways the Forerunners could not comprehend. But somewhere between creator and creation, trust fractured. The Forerunners came to believe the Precursors favored humanity as the next inheritors of the mantle. Fear and insecurity twisted into resentment. Whether the threat was real or imagined, no one truly knew. But the Forerunners launched a catastrophic rebellion. In one of the galaxy's darkest episodes, they drove the Precursors to near extinction. The victory was not clean. The remnants of the destroyed Precursors decayed into a fine powder meant to regenerate their lost forms. But without their full consciousness guiding the process, the powder twisted into something corrupted. Over tens of thousands of years it changed, developing into a parasitic intelligence capable of consuming and repurposing organic life. The result was the Flood, a horror that would one day threaten every living species. At first, the Flood was only a scattered presence, lurking on forgotten worlds. Eventually, it came into contact with ancient humanity. Humans, long before their second rise to civilization, had been a spacefaring empire with fleets, colonies, and technology rivaling that of their Forerunner rivals. When they encountered the Flood, they recognized the threat almost instantly. They burned infected worlds, destroyed ships carrying even the faintest trace of contamination, and waged brutal campaigns to halt its spread. These desperate measures, however, were misunderstood by the Forerunners, who watched humanity's violent expansion and concluded it was an act of aggression rather than survival. A devastating war followed. Humans fought valiantly, but ultimately fell to Forerunner power. Their civilizations were dismantled. Their technologies were stripped away. Survivors were forcibly devolved and scattered across Earth and other seeded worlds to begin again in near primitive conditions. The Forerunners, believing they had restored order, resumed their reign as protectors of the galaxy. They never realized they had doomed themselves by crushing the one species that had begun to understand the Flood. For a time, the galaxy was peaceful. The Forerunners maintained vast ecological networks, uplifted emerging species, and expanded their knowledge of the universe. Their archives grew thicker, their star maps deeper. Warrior servants patrolled the borders of their empire, life workers ensured biodiversity thrived on thousands of planets. Builder factions constructed marvels so advanced that future generations would struggle to comprehend them. But the flood was not gone. It drifted patiently in dark corners, waiting for the moment conditions were right. And when it returned, its spread was far more aggressive than before. Outbreaks erupted in multiple systems. At first, the Forerunners believed they could contain them. They sent fleets to isolate infected regions. They quarantined planets and deployed weapons designed to neutralize biological threats. But as each battle unfolded, the flood adapted. Its infection forms learned new strategies. Its combat forms used captured bodies with terrifying efficiency. And worst of all, as the parasite consumed more and more sentient minds, it coalesced into a higher intelligence. This consciousness called itself the grave mind. Every memory absorbed, every strategy devoured, every mind lost strengthened this central will. The grave mind taunted Forerunner commanders with knowledge ripped from their own fallen comrades. Its voice seeped into their networks. It learned Forerunner languages, tactics, and vulnerabilities. Entire sectors fell in a matter of years. Planets were transformed into landscapes of writhing biomass. Fortresses fell silent. Fleets vanished without a trace. Even the most advanced Forerunner technology could not keep pace with the parasite. Warrior servants sacrificed themselves by the millions, but each fallen soldier became a new asset for the flood. As hope faded, the Forerunner leadership convened to consider a final measure of last resort: the activation of the Halo Array. The array consisted of ring worlds built on an unimaginable scale, combining artificial habitats with superweapons capable of wiping out all sentient life above a certain threshold. If activated, the rings would starve the flood by eliminating every species capable of sustaining it. It was the most terrible solution ever conceived, one that contradicted the very principle of the mantle. But the Forerunners saw no alternative. Some leaders resisted the plan, including the Didact, a revered commander of the warrior servant caste. He believed humanity, one of the precursors chosen, posed a threat and sought alternative ways to preserve the Forerunners' legacy, even if it meant forced cybernetic transformation of human captives. This obsession fractured his sanity and brought him into direct conflict with his wife, the Librarian. The Librarian, head of the Lifeworker caste, believed humanity would one day reclaim the mantle after the Forerunners were gone. She dedicated her life to preserving species in carefully curated genetic archives stored across hidden worlds. Her goal was not to save the Forerunners, but to ensure life itself could recover from the disaster she knew was coming. She prepared Earth and other human worlds for the day when life would be reseeded after the rings fired. Her actions placed her at odds with the Didact, but aligned her with the greater demands of the future. At last, with the flood breaching even the heart of Forerunner space, the leadership activated the Halo Array. The rings unleashed an energy pulse that spread through the galaxy. Every sentient being with a nervous system complex enough to support flood infection died instantly. The flood starved. The grave mind went silent. The galaxy became eerily still. Entire civilizations vanished in an instant. Oceans calmed, skies darkened, forests went quiet. The Forerunners, knowing their era had ended, disappeared. Some may have entered hidden dimensions. Others accepted extinction. Their machines remained, running automated tasks long after their masters were gone. The Halos entered standby mode. The monitors appointed to each ring waited for directives. Shield worlds sealed themselves. Terraforming units continued maintaining environments for potential reseeding. Humanity, reduced to scattered primitive populations after their earlier defeat, survived on Earth and other seeded worlds. They had no memory of their ancient empire or the war against the Forerunners. They awoke into a new dawn, ignorant of the sacrifices that saved them. Slowly, over thousands of years, humans rebuilt. They created language, culture, and technology. They spread across Earth, forming civilizations. They invented the compass, the wheel, philosophy, mathematics, and eventually engines that carried them into the sky. When humanity finally returned to the stars, they did so unaware of their past. They discovered ruins, relics, and strange artifacts buried on distant worlds. They encountered species shaped by the Forerunners and technologies older than their recorded history. And soon, their rediscovery of the galaxy would draw the attention of those who believed the Forerunners were divine. It would lead humanity toward a conflict neither they nor their alien adversaries realized was rooted in decisions made 100,000 years before. This was the quiet beginning of a new era, one born from ancient sacrifice and destined to ignite once more in fire. Chapter 2: The Covenant War Saga. Humanity's rediscovery of the stars began with optimism, unity, and ambition. After centuries of conflict on Earth, nations formed a single global government and established the United Nations Space Command to guide expansion beyond the solar system. Slipspace travel unlocked the ability to reach distant planets, and soon dozens of colonies stretched across human-controlled space. Inner colonies near Earth became centers of industry and government, while outer colonies, rich with resources, grew rapidly but often felt neglected. As humanity expanded, tension grew between central authority and frontier worlds. Insurrections erupted. Bombings, raids, and sabotage became frequent. The UNSC responded with increasingly militarized operations, and the Office of Naval Intelligence began covert programs, including the Spartan II project, originally designed to neutralize human rebels through unmatched precision and minimal collateral damage. But the human-civil conflict was destined to become irrelevant. Far beyond any human patrol route, an alien empire had been expanding for millennia. This empire, known as the Covenant, was a theocratic alliance of multiple species united under the belief that the Forerunners were gods who had achieved transcendence through a metaphysical event called the Great Journey. The Covenant religion was built upon reverence for Forerunner artifacts. Every structure, vessel, or device created by the ancient civilization was viewed as holy. When the Covenant eventually encountered these relics scattered across the galaxy, they built their entire political and spiritual framework around them. Humanity entered the Covenant's awareness not through diplomacy or accident, but through blasphemy. On the agricultural world of harvest, human colonists uncovered a Forerunner artifact. The Covenant, upon investigating, learned an unthinkable truth hidden within its data patterns. Humans, genetically, were reclaimers, beings capable of interacting with Forerunner systems. To the Covenant leadership, this was heresy. Their divine scriptures, carefully controlled and interpreted by the prophets, insisted that only the Covenant species had been chosen to inherit the Forerunner's legacy. Humans threatened the foundation of their religion. Rather than admit the truth and risk internal collapse, the prophets issued a verdict: the humans must be purged. The Covenant attack on Harvest was swift and devastating. Plasma bombardments ignited the atmosphere and burned cities to glass. A few survivors fled, but the colony was effectively erased. UNSC vessels arriving later found only destruction. Communications across human space crackled with disbelief. No one had imagined hostile alien contact. But the nightmare intensified The Covenant announced their intention clearly in intercepted transmissions. Divine will demanded humanity's extinction. From that moment, the Human Covenant War began. Humanity fought bravely but was hopelessly outmatched. Covenant ships were protected by energy shields impervious to most human weapons. Their plasma cannons could melt continents. Their warriors were divided into specialized castes. Elites wielded energy swords with unrivaled agility. Grunts formed disciplined ranks armed with methane-powered weapons. Jackals used energy shields to create mobile firing barriers. Hunters, colossal beings composed of worm-like organisms fused into armored giants, could tear through vehicles with ease. The Covenant fought with religious zeal, believing every human life taken was an act of devotion. World after world fell. The outer colonies were devastated. Entire civilizations burned overnight. The UNSC reorganized all military resources to form a desperate defensive line, relying on Spartan II teams for the most dangerous missions. These Spartans, abducted as children and transformed through surgical augmentation, became humanity's last beacon of hope. Operating in small fire teams, they boarded Covenant ships, rescued captives, sabotaged enemy supply lines, and turned the tide in isolated engagements. Their legendary reputation spread across the Navy. Marines whispered that one Spartan was worth a battalion. Covenant soldiers believed they were demons. But even Spartans could not be everywhere. As Covenant attacks grew more coordinated, humanity realized their enemy had a strategy: advance systematically toward the inner colonies, weaken humanity's industrial core, cut supply lines, and eventually strike Earth. The most important bastion protecting Earth was the planet Reach, a fortress world housing major shipyards, training academies, and the heart of UNSC military operations. The Covenant knew this. Their fleets converged on Reach in overwhelming numbers after years of probing attacks. The fall of Reach was one of humanity's darkest hours. The Covenant began by infiltrating key research stations, knocking out communications, and dropping forces behind defensive lines. When they committed to full-scale invasion, dozens of Covenant capital ships emerged from slip space. Orbital defense platforms fired relentlessly, destroying several vessels, but not enough. Covenant cruisers unleashed bombardments that shattered cities and ignited forests. Ground forces overwhelmed military outposts. Spartan teams scattered across the planet to execute high-risk missions aimed at delaying the enemy. They destroyed jammers, neutralized artillery, evacuated civilians, and attempted to hold strategic points. But the Covenant's numbers were too great. Noble Team, a group of Spartan III soldiers assigned to Reach, fought heroically across multiple operations. They defended comm stations, escorted critical assets, detonated slipspace bombs aboard Covenant carriers, and sacrificed themselves one by one to buy precious time. But despite their efforts, the Covenant established orbital dominance. Eventually, the command was given to evacuate all remaining UNSC vessels. The skies turned purple with plasma fire. Reach's continents burned. Spartan teams that survived the early battles were scattered, presumed dead, or forced into last stands. One ship escaped the slaughter, the UNSC Pillar of Autumn. Captain Jacob Keyes commanded the vessel, carrying a precious cargo: Cortana, an advanced AI created by Dr. Catherine Halsey. Cortana had discovered something during the battle. By analyzing a Forerunner artifact, she obtained coordinates to a distant location in uncharted space. Keyes ordered a slipspace jump following those coordinates. The Autumn fled Reach moments before the planet was completely glassed. When the Pillar of Autumn exited slipspace, the crew gazed upon a discovery beyond imagination. Orbiting a gas giant was an enormous ring-shaped construct, tens of thousands of kilometers wide, with an artificial inner surface populated by forests, mountains, rivers, and weather systems. A world turned into a circle. The Covenant, having tracked the autumn, appeared moments later. They recognized the structure instantly, a forerunner ring. To them, it was sacred. To the humans, it was a mystery, but both sides understood it held immense significance. Cortana executed emergency protocols. Captain Keyes ordered the crew to abandon ship as Covenant boarding parties overwhelmed their defenses. Escape pods launched toward the ring world below. Spartan John 117, known as the Master Chief, safeguarded Cortana and boarded a pod. Flaming debris from the autumn scattered across the landscape. The war had followed humanity onto a battleground of ancient design. The ring, which the Covenant called Halo, would become the center of a conflict that neither species understood. Its true purpose was still buried within Forerunner memory. Its silent ecosystems and metallic structures watched as humanity made landfall for the first time. The Covenant believed Halo would initiate their divine ascension. They believed activating it would fulfill the great journey, a transformation into eternal, godlike existence. They were wrong. Tragically, fatally wrong. But neither side yet understood the truth hidden in the ring's core. The war was about to transform. Old enemies would awaken, secrets buried for eons would surface, and Halo, dormant for 100,000 years, would soon reveal its terrible purpose to all who dared set foot upon it. Chapter 3. The Halo Saga. When the escape pod carrying the Master Chief crashed onto the ring world's surface, the violence of war gave way, for a brief moment, to a surreal stillness. The pod's wreckage smoked softly in a field of alien grass. Above, the sky arched in a way no natural horizon ever could. Instead of curving downward out of sight, the land rose back up in the distance, forming a luminous band overhead. Covered in distant terrain, mountains, and clouds, Halo revealed itself as a vast ring curving silently through space, its inner surface a carefully shaped environment. The illusion of a natural world concealed its purpose as a construct built with terrifying precision. The Master Chief emerged from the wreck and looked around. The air was breathable, the gravity normal, the terrain familiar enough to move across easily. Yet everything carried a sense of artificial perfection. Structures of smooth metal rose from the ground in geometric shapes, their surfaces marked with glowing lines and circular patterns. These were clear signs of Forerunner craftsmanship, though neither he nor the surviving Marines yet understood the scale of what they had found. Their immediate concern was survival. Regroup, find Captain Keyes, and avoid Covenant patrols. The ring did not remain peaceful for long. Covenant dropships swept across the sky, deploying troops to hunt escape pods and secure territory. Human survivors formed small fire teams, hiding in rocky valleys, underground caverns, and near Forerunner ruins. The Master Chief, with Cortana integrated into his armor, moved between these scattered groups, rescuing those he could. Together, they fended off Covenant forces in canyons, hillsides, and cliffside installations. The ring's diverse landscapes provided both cover and danger. Its shining blue rivers and towering cliffs became battlegrounds where alien plasma and human bullets carved new stories into ancient ground. It was through these early skirmishes that Cortana began to sense the ring's deeper functions. Whenever she accessed Forerunner terminals or interfaces, she found traces of massive interconnected systems whose full purposes eluded her. She detected power relays, control nodes, and indexed subsystems that seemed designed to manage something far larger than an isolated structure. Halo, she realized, was not simply a habitat. It was part of a network, But to what end, she could not yet determine. The UNSC soon established a makeshift base in one of the ring's valleys, using dropships and ground vehicles salvaged from escape pods. From there, they planned missions to locate Captain Keyes and gather intelligence on Covenant activity. Keyes had been taken prisoner by Covenant forces and held elsewhere on the ring. The Master Chief led a rescue operation, infiltrating a Covenant cruiser resting just above the ground on an energy field. Inside the dimly lit corridors of the alien vessel, he fought through elites, grunts, and jackals, navigating the glowing halls and strange gravity lifts until he reached the holding cells. The rescue was partially successful. Keyes was freed, along with a group of Marines, but the encounter revealed something ominous. The Covenant were not simply occupying Halo, they were searching for something within it. Their chatter, translated through intercepted communications, spoke of a holy artifact, a divine mechanism, and a power that would bring about the Great Journey. They believed Halo was a key to salvation. Keyes and Cortana began to suspect this ring was a weapon of some kind, but they did not yet grasp its full scope. To better understand the ring, Cortana directed the chief toward a central structure called the Silent Cartographer. This massive, island-bound installation contained a map of the ring's systems and the location of its control center. The mission to infiltrate it was brutal. Covenant forces defended the island with vehicles, aircraft, and entrenched troops. The Master Chief, supported by Marines, fought across beaches, up stone ramps, and through metallic hallways bathed in white light. Inside the cartographer, Cortana interfaced with a central console and successfully retrieved the coordinates of the control room. They now knew where they needed to go to understand Halo's purpose and, if necessary, activate or disable it. The control room, housed in a towering Forerunner spire, loomed over a region of snow-covered mountains and icy plateaus. Reaching it required a combined effort on the ground and in the air, with the Chief and Marines pushing through entrenched Covenant defenses in blizzards and biting cold. The ring's artificially regulated climate felt real enough, but Cortana's analysis confirmed it was controlled by hidden mechanisms deep beneath the surface. Halo was not a natural world altered to function as a ring. It was an engineered object with life support systems woven into its very structure. When the control room was finally accessed, Cortana entered the network and flooded herself with data. For a moment, she was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of it. The ring's systems contained star charts, species records, environmental management routines, and something else, a reference to an ancient enemy. The ring had been built for the purpose of containing and stopping a specific threat. This threat was not the Covenant. It was something older and infinitely more dangerous. While Cortana remained inside the control systems, the Master Chief proceeded on a mission to locate Captain Keyes, who had gone silent on a follow-up operation. The search led him to a remote, swamp-enshrouded facility deep within the ring's interior. As he moved through the dense fog and twisted tree trunks, there was an eerie absence of Covenant presence. Abandoned weapons and damaged equipment suggested a battle had occurred, but no bodies were found near the entrance. Inside the facility, the lights flickered and the air felt heavy. Strange organic growths clung to the walls, pulsating faintly. A recovered recording from a squad of Marines who had entered earlier revealed the truth in fragments. They had found something sealed within the structure. Pods had ruptured. Small, leaping organisms had swarmed them. Communications dissolved into screams, gunfire, and then silence. What humanity had encountered on Halo was the Flood, the same parasitic species that had once overrun the Forerunners. It had been sleeping in containment for eons, and now Thanks to Covenant curiosity and human presence, it had been unleashed. The Master Chief found himself beset by small, skittering infection forms that threw themselves at him, attempting to burrow into exposed areas of his armor. Soon, twisted bodies emerged from deeper within the facility. Once human and once Covenant soldiers, now grotesquely transformed into combat forms under Flood control. Their limbs jerked with unnatural strength. Their torsos bulged with infection. They clutched weapons and moved with a terrifying single-mindedness. The Chief fought through waves of these creatures, realizing that every dead body on the battlefield was a potential new soldier for the Flood. Amid the chaos, a new figure appeared, a floating metallic orb surrounded by rotating plates of light. It introduced itself in a pleasant, calm tone as 343 Guilty Spark, Monitor of Installation 04. The Monitor explained that the Flood had escaped containment and that standard protocol required activation of the installation's primary weapon. The Chief, not yet fully aware of what that entailed, agreed to assist. Guilty Spark teleported him to a distant library-like structure filled with endless, towering columns and swarming Flood forces. The Monitor guided him through this deadly labyrinth, instructing him to retrieve the installation's index, a key required to activate Halo. The journey through the library was grueling. The Master Chief faced countless Flood combat forms, carrier forms that exploded into infection swarms, and defensive sentinels, Forerunner drones designed to combat the parasite. Eventually, he retrieved the index and was teleported back to the control room with Guilty Spark by his side. The Monitor urged him to insert the index into the central console and fire the installation, insisting it was the only way to combat the Flood. Cortana intervened at the last second. Having had time to process the control room's data, she revealed the terrible truth. Halo was not a precision weapon designed merely to destroy the Flood itself. It worked by eliminating all sentient life within its effective radius. The Flood could not be killed directly, but it could be starved by depriving it of hosts. The Halo array was a last resort measure, one the Forerunners had ultimately used to wipe out civilization across the galaxy. Activating this ring would repeat that event on a galactic scale. Guilty Spark confirmed this revelation without hesitation, perplexed that the Reclaimer, his title for the Chief, would resist such a logical and effective solution. To the Monitor, preserving the installation and enacting its intended function were simple matters of protocol. To the Chief and Cortana, the price was unacceptable. They refused to initiate the firing sequence. Their refusal triggered Guilty Spark's hostility. The Monitor deployed sentinels against the Chief, attempting to seize the index and complete the protocol himself. The Master Chief destroyed the sentinels and fled with Cortana, now fully aware that they needed a different approach. They could not allow the Flood to spread, but they also could not permit the Covenant or the Monitor to activate Halo. The only solution left was destruction of the ring itself. Destroying Halo required a source of immense energy directed at its critical systems. Cortana identified the remains of the crashed Pillar of Autumn as a viable option. If its fusion reactors were overloaded, the resulting explosion would be powerful enough to destabilize the ring and tear it apart. The Chief fought his way back through Flood-infested corridors and Covenant skirmishes to reach the crash site. Captain Keyes had already been consumed by the Flood, his mind integrated into a growing Gravemind node. The Chief was forced to retrieve command codes from what little remained of him. With the codes recovered, Cortana and the Chief overloaded the reactors. As the ring began to tear itself apart, they raced through collapsing structures and burning corridors, commandeering a longsword fighter just in time to escape. Behind them, Halo shattered, exploding into fragments that tumbled silently through space. The flood forces on the ring were destroyed. Guilty Spark survived, drifting amid the debris. The Covenant would eventually learn of Halo's fate and hunger for answers, but for the moment, humanity's victory came in the form of survival and the destruction of a weapon that could have killed every sentient being in the galaxy. The story, however, did not end with the explosion of a single ring. Elsewhere in the galaxy, other installations still waited. Chapter 4. The Rise of the Arbiter Saga. The destruction of the first Halo ring sent shockwaves across the galaxy, not only through the remnants of human forces struggling to survive, but especially through the Covenant. Word of the ring's loss traveled quickly through their vast empire, carried by panicked transmissions and fragments of data retrieved from drifting debris. For the Covenant, Halo was not simply a structure. It was sacred. It was the divine instrument through which they believed the Forerunners had transcended mortality to achieve eternal paradise in the Great Journey. The destruction of a ring was unthinkable. It contradicted the foundation of their religion. Someone had to be blamed. Within the Covenant hierarchy, the Sangheili, or elites, had long served as the guardians of the prophets who ruled the Covenant. For centuries, they had maintained order through military strength and unwavering loyalty. They commanded fleets, led ground forces, and enforced the will of the prophets. But when Halo was destroyed, the high prophets of truth, mercy, and regret placed responsibility squarely upon the elites, claiming their failure to protect the sacred ring was evidence of negligence or even betrayal. The political undercurrents that had simmered for years suddenly erupted. In truth, the prophets had grown increasingly uneasy with the power and influence of the Sangheili. They had been waiting for an opportunity to remake the Covenant structure, giving more authority to the Jiralhanae, or brutes, who were easier to manipulate and more willing to follow orders without question. While the prophets used the catastrophe to reshape their military, a different drama unfolded around a single Sangheili commander who had survived the ring's destruction. Thel 'Vadam, once a respected leader, had commanded the fleet responsible for protecting the installation. He had survived the explosion, but returned to the Covenant in disgrace. His survival was seen not as resilience, but as shame. In the Covenant courts, he was publicly judged, humiliated, and denounced as a failure. But rather than execute him, the prophets offered a position both revered and cursed: the title of Arbiter. The Arbiter was a role steeped in ancient Covenant tradition. It was not an honor, but a sentence. Those who became Arbiter were warriors expected to atone for their sins through death and battle, carrying out missions considered impossible. The prophets cloaked the role in sacred language, claiming it was a path to redemption. In truth, it was a convenient way to use skilled warriors while ensuring they did not live long enough to cause political complications. Thel accepted the mantle, knowing it would likely lead to his death, but refusing to hide from responsibility. He donned the Arbiter's armor, marked by ancient symbols and scarred plates, and prepared for the dangerous missions he would be commanded to undertake. His first assignment was to eliminate a group of heretics who had taken control of a Forerunner gas mining facility. These heretics had learned the truth about Halo's nature, that activating the rings did not bring salvation, but annihilation. They accused the prophets of lying. The Arbiter infiltrated the facility, fighting through narrow corridors filled with machinery and clouds of drifting gas. He faced heretic soldiers, drones, and even automated Forerunner sentinels that defended the ancient structures. Eventually, he confronted their leader, who revealed that the prophets had knowingly deceived the covenant for centuries. The arbiter dismissed these claims as lies meant to create division. In his eyes, faith superseded evidence. He defeated the heretic leader and returned to the prophets, unaware that he was being used as a pawn in a far deeper conspiracy. While the arbiter carried out his missions, the covenant prepared a massive assault on humanity. The prophets discovered Earth's location and believed it to hold a portal to the great journey. The prophet of regret, eager for glory, launched a preemptive strike with a small fleet. His forces descended upon Earth, focusing on the city of New Mombasa. Human defenses fought fiercely. Orbital platforms fired relentlessly at Covenant ships. Marines battled in the streets. The Master Chief, having returned to Earth after surviving the destruction of Halo, engaged Covenant troops across the embattled city. The prophet of regret realized too late that his forces were insufficient. Cornered, he activated a slip-space jump within the atmosphere, creating a massive shockwave that tore through the city and caused catastrophic damage. The chief pursued him through the portal left in the jump's wake. This reckless attack put the Covenant leadership in turmoil. The prophets of truth and mercy used regret's mistake as justification to strip the elites of their role as protectors. They replaced them with the brutes, whose loyalty lay solely with the prophets. This decision ignited tension between the two warrior races. The elites, proud and disciplined, viewed the brutes as violent and crude. The brutes, resentful of elite authority, saw this as their chance to rise. The arbiter experienced these shifting dynamics firsthand. Though still loyal, he noticed the growing hostility and the prophet's manipulation more clearly with each mission. The next mission given to the arbiter was far more perilous. Deep beneath the surface of another Halo installation, a long dormant menace stirred. The flood, thought to have been largely contained, had begun to spread again. The arbiter descended into the dark, ancient caverns filled with twisting tendrils, pulsating growths, and the sounds of creatures moving beyond sight. He fought through infected Covenant soldiers, automated defenses, and flood forms that adapted rapidly to his presence. It was in this grim labyrinth that he encountered something that challenged everything he believed. The grave mind. The grave mind, a being composed of thousands of absorbed consciousnesses, spoke with a voice filled with sorrow, intelligence, and eerie calm. It revealed truths the Covenant had never shared. It showed the arbiter visions of the Forerunner's final days, the true purpose of the Halo rings, and the lies woven through Covenant doctrine. When the grave mind captured both the Master Chief and the arbiter, it forced them to confront the reality that activation of the Halo array was not divine ascension, but mass extinction. The grave mind transported both warriors away from its lair, scattering them to different parts of a massive Forerunner artifact known as the Ark. For the arbiter, this marked the beginning of a transformation. Doubt seated itself in his mind. He had dedicated his life to serving the prophets and enforcing their will. But now, he faced undeniable evidence that the foundation of Covenant belief was built on deception. The prophets had twisted ancient knowledge to maintain control, feeding their people lies and condemning them to die for a cause that never existed. The arbiter confronted these revelations while fighting alongside other Sangheli who had begun to question the prophet's authority. When the brutes violently seized control and murdered elite council members in cold blood, the truth became impossible to ignore. The schism began. Elites and brutes turned on each other, and the Covenant split into warring factions. The arbiter emerged as a leader of the Sangheli resistance, determined to put an end to the prophet's lies and stop the activation of the remaining halo rings. His journey, once meant to end in death and dishonor, transformed into something far greater. He evolved from a disgraced commander into the unifying force of a fractured warrior race. His path would soon intersect with humanity in ways neither side had anticipated. The war that had begun in blood and fire would lead to an alliance forged from necessity and truth. And as forces converged upon the Ark and other Forerunner sites across the galaxy, both the Arbiter and the Master Chief would find themselves fighting not just for their own species, but for every living being threatened by the remnants of ancient decisions. Chapter 5: The Ark and the Endgame. Saga. The Covenant's civil war, ignited by the Prophet's betrayal of the Sangheili, spread rapidly across their entire empire. Warships that once traveled in coordinated formation now fired upon one another. Sangheili fleets splintered away, forming coalitions to protect their homeworlds and defend their honor. The Jiralhanae, empowered by the Prophets, seized military command structures with ruthless brutality. Covenant worlds erupted into violence as loyalties fractured along species lines, and centuries of indoctrination unraveled in a matter of weeks. The empire that had once seemed invincible now crumbled under the weight of deception and betrayal. During this turmoil, the Prophet of Truth remained fixated on activating the Halo Array. He believed the great journey would elevate him and his faithful into a divine state of existence. With the Gravemind manipulating events from the shadows and the remaining loyalist Covenant forces mixed with flood outbreaks, the galaxy stood on the brink of catastrophic collapse. The Master Chief, having survived his encounter with the Gravemind and been transported to a distant part of the Forerunner structure, found himself in an environment unlike anything he had faced before. This was the Ark, a colossal installation beyond the reaches of normal space, capable of constructing new halo rings and remotely activating the entire array. The Ark was not inside the Milky Way, but outside its edges, built by the Forerunners to ensure the halo array could be activated safely without destroying the Ark itself. Here, the scale of Forerunner engineering revealed itself fully. Towering spires rose from vast plains. Metallic citadels shimmered beneath artificial suns. The landscapes ranged from deserts to jungles to frozen stretches of crystalline blue. The Ark was a cathedral of technology and biology fused into a single, seamless whole. It was the beating heart of the Forerunner plan to rebuild the galaxy after the rings were fired, housing massive libraries of genetic samples and environmental blueprints. The Master Chief emerged into this alien world alongside the Sangheili, now separated from the Covenant and seeking to stop the Prophets. The Arbiter stood among them as a leader, representing his people in alliance with humanity for the first time. Although mistrust lingered between both sides, the urgency of their situation left no room for doubt. The Arbiter had seen the truth. Humanity had endured the Prophet's lies firsthand. Together, they formed an unlikely but powerful partnership. Their immediate goal was clear: stop the Prophet of Truth before he could activate the rings. Truth had traveled to the Ark with a loyalist Covenant fleet and intended to use the control center located at its core. His forces were massive, bolstered by Jiralhanae troops who executed his commands with blind devotion. The Master Chief and the Arbiter led a joint assault, fighting through landscapes filled with ancient Forerunner devices and entrenched Covenant positions. Each battle carried the weight of extinction. If truth succeeded, every sentient civilization would die. As they advanced across the Ark, the Gravemind spread its influence further. The Flood, somehow transported to the Ark along with the Chief and the Arbiter, began infection on a scale that threatened to overshadow both the Covenant loyalists and the Allied forces. Flood tendrils sprouted along metal walls. Combat forms patrolled ruined Covenant camps. The Gravemind's voice echoed through Forerunner corridors, whispering cryptic taunts. The ancient parasite had recognized the Ark as a place of immense strategic value. The outcome of the conflict here would determine its future, and possibly its freedom. The Arbiter, hardened by betrayal and empowered by truth, grew into a formidable leader during the Ark campaign. He confronted brute commanders who had once been his rivals. He fought alongside Marines who only weeks earlier had viewed all Sangheili as enemies. His actions forged a tentative trust between the two species. Humanity began to see that the Sangheili had never been blind followers. They had been manipulated just as humanity had, and the Sangheili saw firsthand the resilience and determination of humanity, a species that had survived despite overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, the Master Chief pushed relentlessly toward the Ark's control center. He fought through sprawling valleys filled with wreckage from Covenant ships, navigated metallic bridgeways suspended over immense chasms, and battled flood swarms within labyrinthine structures where shadows moved with predatory intent. Cortana, still held captive by the Gravemind, occasionally sent fragmented messages through the Ark's networks. Her voice shifted from pleading to defiant to strained. The Chief remained focused on rescuing her, even as he worked to stop truth. The idea of losing Cortana was unacceptable. Their bond had deepened beyond a simple soldier-AI partnership. She was his conscience, his strategist, and his closest ally. The alliance between humans and Sangheili pushed through the last line of defense. Loyalist Covenant forces clung desperately to their positions. Brutes fought with primal fury. The Prophet of Truth, surrounded by holographic fields and guarded by his most fanatical followers, initiated the activation sequence. The Master Chief and the Arbiter stormed the Citadel. Flood spores filled the air. Sentinels shattered under plasma blasts. The tension broke when even the Gravemind, recognizing the danger of the array's activation, temporarily allied with the UNSC Sangheili coalition. Flood forms swarmed the Citadel in a grotesque show of truce, helping clear a path to the Prophet. At last, they reached truth. The Prophet was frail, his physical body deteriorating, yet his belief in the great journey remained absolute. He had already begun the activation. The Chief attempted to shut down the system, but truth insisted that the rings were salvation, not destruction. The Arbiter confronted him directly. Truth, cornered and delusional, clung to his faith as the Arbiter held him accountable for the countless lives lost. In a moment that symbolized the collapse of the Covenant's ideological core, the Arbiter executed the Prophet of Truth, ending his reign and the religious tyranny that had consumed the Covenant for generations. With Truth dead, activation halted, and loyalist forces scattered, the coalition turned its focus to the Flood. The Gravemind, having used the temporary alliance to its benefit, betrayed it immediately. The parasite surged with renewed aggression. Infection forms poured into the Citadel. Combat forms swarmed the outer platforms. The Allied forces retreated, realizing the Flood now intended to seize the Ark itself as a new vessel for galactic conquest. Cortana, still held captive, sent one last coherent message to the Chief. She had discovered a solution within the Ark's storage platforms. A new Halo ring, Installation 08, partially constructed and awaiting final calibration. If they could complete the ring's firing sequence, They could destroy the local flood infestation without triggering the full array, but activating a new ring required immense energy, and only the destruction of the flood's stronghold and the Gravemine's central mass would ensure success. The final battle on the Ark loomed, with the galaxy's future held together by the fragile alliance of humans and Sangheli. The Master Chief prepared to do what he had always done: fight without hesitation, survive without compromise, and complete the mission no matter the cost. The Arbiter, once condemned to die for a false sin, stood at his side, ready to fulfill a purpose far greater than redemption. The stage was set for the conflict that would decide the fate of everything the Forerunners had left behind, everything the flood could corrupt, and everything humanity could hope to become. Chapter 6: The Master Chief Saga. The final confrontation on the Ark began with a sense of urgency that left no room for hesitation. The flood, having consumed countless victims and exploited the chaos of the Covenant civil war, sought to claim the Ark as a breeding ground. The Gravemine's influence seeped through every corridor, every ruined Covenant camp, and every Forerunner structure. The parasite had grown vast, intelligent, and bold. If it gained control of the Ark or escaped into the wider galaxy, no species would survive. Against this threat, the fragile alliance of humans and Sangheli prepared for one last push. Their goal was simple but overwhelming: destroy the flood presence on the Ark, complete the construction of the replacement halo ring, and fire it to cleanse the area before the parasite could spread. Master Chief John 117, having survived battles across multiple star systems, stepped once more into the role he knew better than any other: the soldier on whom the fate of humanity rested. The Arbiter, his former enemy turned indispensable ally, joined him. Their alliance symbolized something neither had expected when the Covenant first attacked humanity: a future beyond war, a future built on shared truth instead of ancient lies. The flood had forced them together, but their cooperation had grown into something resembling mutual respect. Before the final plan could begin, the Chief had one mission he could not abandon. Cortana, trapped deep within the Gravemine's tendrils, continued to send fragmented signals. She had endured mental attacks, manipulation, and exposure to the collective consciousness of the flood. Her logic systems were fraying under the pressure. The Chief could not leave her behind. Their bond, forged through years of survival and trust, gave him a clarity of purpose that transcended orders. He tracked her signal to a massive flood-infested structure embedded within the Ark's terrain. Its towers pulsed with organic matter. Its halls reeked of decay. Every wall was alive with writhing infection. It was the last place any human should enter, but the Chief moved forward without hesitation. Inside the flood hive, he confronted a world of horrors. Combat forms lunged from every corner. Bloated carrier forms burst, releasing clouds of infection spores. The Gravemine's voice echoed, taunting him, pleading with him, tempting him. It spoke as if it knew him intimately, as if it had plundered Cortana's memories and used them as weapons. But the Chief stayed focused. He fought his way through endless rooms filled with alien biomass until he found her. Cortana, housed in a Forerunner data module corrupted by flood influence. Her holographic form flickered erratically and her voice wavered, but she recognized him instantly. She apologized for everything she had said under the Gravemine's control. He simply answered, "We go together." With Cortana recovered, the Chief escaped the collapsing structure and returned to Allied forces. Her knowledge would be essential for what came next. The flood surge intensified. The Gravemind, enraged by the loss of Cortana and sensing danger, launched attacks across the Ark. Flood forms poured from caves, descended from towering cliffs, and threw themselves at the Allied front lines with suicidal fury. The coalition held their ground, but barely. Every soldier understood that they could not survive a prolonged conflict. The only solution remained the partial halo ring, suspended above the Ark on vast mechanical arms. Although incomplete, it was structurally sound enough to fire one controlled pulse. Cortana determined that activating the new ring would cleanse the Ark and destroy the flood forces within its radius. But the activation sequence required precise calibration from within the control room of the new installation. The Master Chief and Arbiter embarked on the final mission, carrying a powerful explosive charge that would destroy the central flood-infested mass once the ring's firing sequence was initiated. They boarded a UNSC forward assault craft and sped across the Ark's shifting terrain, racing toward the unfinished ring's surface. The new halo was pristine, its terrain only partially formed. Large, empty gaps revealed exposed machinery and skeletal frameworks of future landscapes. Towers jutted from the ring's inner curve, waiting to be integrated into a complete ecosystem. The sky above it shimmered with artificial light. The environment felt familiar, yet alien, a reminder that the Forerunners had built these rings not to support life, but to end it. Wind blew across metal plains. Mechanical platforms groaned as construction systems struggled to complete their routines. Flood forces had already begun to infest parts of the ring, moving with urgency to reach the control room first. The final battle unfolded across incomplete valleys and half-built corridors. The Chief and Arbiter fought shoulder to shoulder, cutting through flood forms with rifles, grenades, and energy swords. The Gravemind screamed through the ring systems, trying to destabilize the installation's power levels. But with Cortana's help, they pushed through every obstacle. When they reached the control room, Cortana integrated herself into the system. She worked quickly, her voice steady for the first time since her captivity. She armed the ring and prepared the firing sequence. The Gravemind launched one last desperate attack. The Chief and Arbiter held the line, defending Cortana as she completed the sequence. When she finished, the entire ring hummed with gathering power. The countdown to activation began. To ensure the flood could not interfere, the Master Chief and Arbiter planted the explosive charge within the heart of the flood mass near the ring's core. After arming it, they made their escape aboard a damaged Forerunner vehicle. Flood tendrils whipped toward them. Combat forms crawled across, collapsing platforms. The ring shuddered as its power levels spiked. Mechanical arms retracted. The entire installation roared with energy. The two warriors raced toward the only available escape craft, the wreckage of the Forward Unto Dawn, a UNSC frigate half buried within the Ark's terrain. The Arbiter piloted the ship forward while the Chief fought off flood forms boarding the hull. Once inside, they pushed the engines to maximum power. The newly completed Halo fired its cleansing pulse, a brilliant surge of energy that incinerated the flood across the Ark. The Gravemind wailed one final time as its biomass was obliterated. The ring's firing destabilized the Ark's structure, triggering massive explosions. The Forward Unto Dawn entered slipspace, fleeing the destruction. But the ship was damaged. It tore in half as it entered the rupture. The Arbiter escaped in the forward section and returned to Earth, landing safely and greeted as a hero and representative of the Sangheili. The Master Chief and Cortana remained trapped in the ship's aft section, drifting in unknown space. In the silence of the drifting hull, Cortana placed the Chief into cryosleep. Her voice softened as she said she would wait for him. He replied with a simple instruction: "Wake me when you need me." the cryotubes sealed, leaving them adrift between stars, their story not ended, but suspended. The war had ended for now. Humanity had survived. The covenant had fractured. The flood had been dealt a devastating blow. Yet the galaxy remained vast, filled with dormant forerunner constructs, hidden threats, and unanswered questions. The chief slept as his ship drifted into the darkness, unaware that his journey would resume in worlds untouched by any human presence. Decades later, signals would be detected. New enemies would rise. But the legacy of the Forerunners, the betrayal of the Covenant, and the sacrifices made on Halo and the Ark ensured that humanity would never again face the galaxy blind. They had earned their place among the stars through fire, loss, and perseverance. The saga of Halo would continue. But this chapter, shaped by ancient sins and redeemed by unlikely alliances, marked the end of one era and the silent beginning of another.